Thank you. Thanks for coming. Well done. It's my first time in Sweden. I've been running lots of these workshops. I think that was what Pella said, yeah? I don't know. I've been running a lot of these workshops, and we're increasingly supporting other countries to sort of start to run them. It's really nice to be in Sweden. I've really enjoyed my trip so far, which is good because I spent about 36 hours coming here on trains. So we're going to be talking about values for hours today and tomorrow if you're here. So I thought it would be a good idea to start by talking about what we value, what individually we value in life. So what we're going to do is in pairs on your tables, don't start yet, for five minutes, just discuss between you what you value in life, what motivates you, what you hold to be important. And after 5 minutes, I will ring a bell, something like this. I didn't check whether this has negative cultural connotations in Sweden, but I'm hoping it doesn't. I'll ring a bell, and then if you can, the facilitators on the table bring the group back together. If you can then do a go-round, we call it a go-round, where you share your name, some of the things that you value, your organisation and your role. And while that's going on, if someone or a few people on your table can be making a poster of those values with a sheet of paper that you have. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, I'll ring the bell again, and then if the facilitators or someone can go to Pella and Anders, who will help you to stick them up, and then we'll go from there. Okay? So paired discussions, table go around, values poster. Great, go. Into your tables now to the go-round if you haven't started that already. So introducing yourselves, some of the things that you valued, and your organisation and role. Okay? So if the facilitators can help facilitate that, that'd be great. You have 10 or 12 minutes. Yeah. So can someone from each table take the posters that way? Anders, Marta, Pella, could you shout some stuff out that comes up a lot from the posters? Solidarity. Solidarity. Nice. Friends. Health. Relationships. Truth. Nice. Is there truth? Does it exist? Another workshop. Love. Compassion. You can hear this, can't you? I don't repeat it.
Chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate, wine, beer, yeah, great.
Inner growing.
Nice. Yeah.
Freedom.
Nature, I saw. I'm assuming it's the nature and the same.
Justice.
Good.
Democracy.
Great. How was that? You can't all answer me because there are too many of you, so I'll just sort of pretend that you did. When I first started working on this stuff, when someone asked me that question, what do you value in life, I was like, friends and family, maybe honesty or something. Honesty is a big thing in Britain. Oh, you've got to be honest. And I don't think it's a question that, it's certainly in the UK, we get asked very often by our society, or we get to think about very often. It may be different in Sweden, but I think it's interesting that when you ask people that, they've got good stuff to say eventually, but it's not something that feels natural. It's not something that they reflect on all the time. When you look at the sort of academic research on values, you find out a number of interesting things which we'll build on as we go through the workshop. But the first thing is they're sort of the guiding principles of our lives. So we're thrown on this rock. We've got to work out what to do with ourselves. And there's some of the things that help us to work that out. They're pretty core to our sort of being, and I'll come back to that. They're very broad. So you'll see some of the things that we've touched upon there, like justice or health. They don't apply to one situation. They apply across many different things. And as a result, they can be quite abstract, or sometimes it's difficult to pin them down very specifically. They're often not very conscious. So at the times at which they appear to be conscious, when we're thinking about them, or when they conflict, and things that we value a lot conflict, or intention. And they're the things that allow us to evaluate stuff, whether we like or dislike things, spaces, people, places, institutions, policies, all of that stuff. And this is just a quote from Sir Robert Worcester, who's the founder of sort of Ipsos Mori, who are a big polling company in the UK, but they're now global as well. So they ask people things. And I like his quote: "Opinions are the ripples on the surface of the public's consciousness, shallow and easily changed. Attitudes are the current beneath the surface, deeper and stronger. Values are the deep tides of the public mood, slow to change but powerful." In some ways they're slow to change, but actually we'll see later on they're not always slow to change. And so what we're going to cover today are the first three sections. So how values work, why they matter, and how they develop or change. And then tomorrow we're going to get into implications and then thinking about taking this stuff forward in Sweden. For those of you who aren't here tomorrow, it's okay. You can read the implications in the handbooks that you have, and we'll be feeding back to you what happens tomorrow as well. For those of you who aren't here today, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And so this is today. So I'm about to, look, we're there. And we'll have a break, 20 minutes then, and then we have an end with a group discussion. There's some time for questions before the break as well, and there's questions in the group discussion bit. And then the pub, I've heard. Is that right? The pub at the end. I missed that. So I got into this work. Why this stuff matters to me is about 5 and a bit years ago, I started, I just finished a master's on sustainability, having studied law before and not really liked it. And I worked on some projects that were decarbonisation projects, how to reduce emissions faster than maybe the government, our British government, was saying that they were going to. So at the time they were saying we'll cut emissions by 60% by 2050, and we were looking at lots of climate science and other things and saying, well, that isn't really good enough, especially when you take it into a sort of global context. What are other countries going to do? What is the fair or just thing for people to do? So that was my first question, was how do we do this faster? And so we worked on those projects. They were quite technical. They were quite sort of, how do you change these things for that stuff? And the big hole in those projects was, how do people change? How do you get a society to agree to do that thing, to go to do that bit more? And so that was sort of on my mind at the time. But the thing that we did instead was we thought, well, actually, people don't want to do that. So how do we convince people that we should do that? So the second bit of work that we started doing was sort of saying, hey, folks, maybe we should do this. So we started talking more about climate science and working out ways to, creatively and positively sort of portray our understanding of climate change and other environmental issues, and suggest we need to do those things. But the problem that I now understand, and I did understand when I first read a draft of the Common Cause report, was that both those things get blocked by values. So the first one, not only do you have that how do people change bit, but you also get stuck when you're trying to talk to government and they say, but this doesn't fit our cost-benefit analysis. When we run it into our economic model, it says it's too expensive. And the question you come back at, how do we decide what's expensive? And one of the big problems is that there's a hidden values assumption in those cost-benefit models. And in the UK, at least, we value people's time and their lives based on their income. And that's how we make decisions politically. So there are schemes in the UK that are very popular politically because they save the wealthy people some time. So a new runway at Heathrow Airport, or now high-speed rail, because they've estimated that people using that high-speed rail or the airport, on average, will earn something like 80 or 90,000 euros. So if you save those people 10 minutes, it's worth a lot. But if you save my granny, who doesn't earn very much, 2 hours, it doesn't really matter. And so those hidden values judgments that were in those economic models were a blocking point for doing things that I thought were important and in line with my values. And then the second thing, when you're talking to people about climate change, it's obviously more than just a rational assessment of information or facts. There's a lot going on with people's identity and their values in terms of what they think is important and therefore what they're willing to do and act on. So when I read the Common Cause report, it immediately made sense to me. I'd already seen a lot of Tom Crompton and other people's work before that. So there was an original report in 2006, maybe, I think, called Weathercocks and Signposts. It was talking about behaviour change. And I sort of really liked it, but we weren't working on behaviour change as I saw it. We were working on policy. So I put it in my pile that I'm sure everyone has, which is important things I don't know what to do with. And it went there. And then when I saw Common Cause, I realised the logical conclusion of a lot of the research that they flagged up isn't just about behaviour change, it's about social and cultural change. And so then it suddenly felt relevant to the work that we were doing. And so we got involved and started helping out and skip to the end, I'm here. And I think the main thing that this whole approach or agenda provides is a lens through which to view society, through which to view the problems and potential solutions. So when I'm friends with lots of campaigners, I've sort of done some campaign stuff in the past, and I think campaigners have a very good power lens. So they look at situations and problems through sort of who influences who do we need to get to, who makes the decision. They see society like that, and that often involves money as well. It often involves an economic lens at the same time, because those things are quite intertwined now. And inevitably, some of those campaigners and organisations will also have like a technical lens. So if you're working on climate change, sorry, they're all climate examples, but if you're working on environmental issues, then you may see the world through energy flows or carbon flows. So you've got a very good sort of technical lens, and then you can see solutions to those things. If you're working on development, you might look at other metrics around the Millennium Development Goals or other things like that, and you can see the technical part. And then importantly, we also obviously have a social lens that we look through the world. So why do people do the things they do and think the things they think? And I think what this provides is a sharper or maybe a less obscured, a fuller social lens. Because I think in the UK at least, a lot of NGOs have just ignored motivations and values and worked on the level of sort of attitudes and opinions. So they do opinion polling stuff and they see that and they operate there. And they don't tend to go deeper. Some of the ones that do go deeper into values, they just don't care which values they appeal to. They'll appeal to anything in order to get that small behaviour change that they want. And we'll come back to that later. When you look through the values lens, what you see is that values connect a whole host of social and environmental issues. So it's no coincidence that most of us in this room are not just concerned about climate change. We're probably also reasonably concerned about lots of other things, whether it's child poverty or poverty in developed countries, whether it's inequality, disability rights or gay rights, biodiversity loss, general well-being, democracy, the state of communities, racism. Now, we might not all work on those issues because there's only so much time in a day, but if someone came along and proposed solutions to lots of them, we would say yes. And the reason that we are concerned about all of these different things is a set of values that we prioritise and hold strongly. So values are sort of the roots to concern about all sorts of issues. And when you see that, you start to realise it may not make as much sense it may not make too much sense the way that we silo and slice issues up and say this is an environment issue, this is a development issue, this is a child issue, this is a rights issue. There's a lot of connection, and that's where the name comes from, Common Cause, is that there's common cause in thinking about these values because we'll help each other in all these different issues and more. And so ultimately I think they help us answer this big question, which is how do you broaden, deepen and maintain public engagement on issues that transcend, sort of are bigger than self-interest, which I think when we think back to a lot of the problems that we've raised, which I'll come to in a minute, a lot of these problems, it's not in someone's self-interest to solve them. And I mean that in terms of the way in which they'd see it, which is the time that I spend on it in order to solve this massive problem, which I don't think it was really difficult to solve. and then how much really comes back to me if I spend all that time on this problem. So I mean, so it's that sort of self-interest. I've tried to make this not look like a cult. I tried. Some people ask, what is Common Cause? In the first instance, it's a report. It came out from WWF, Friends of the Earth, and a few other UK NGOs, and Oxfam. But really, it's sort of more like a network or a movement of people in the UK and in other countries now who want to do things differently than how some of it, particularly the larger organisations, have been doing things. It's also sort of an approach. It's a way of changing practice, or the way of some of the things that we do. Although I think it's not new. We haven't invented all of this stuff. So while it's an approach, there are lots of people that already do it very well. And we're not trying to say that we, own all of that stuff. We actually try and shine a light on lots of good initiatives and projects in the UK that do it really well already. And increasingly, it's becoming sort of a space. So we create spaces in which people from NGOs and others can come and actually think about what they're doing and reflect and have some time away. It's a big problem in the UK. I don't know about Sweden, but people who, in the larger organisations who are campaigning, never stop. They're constantly at that sort of level where everything is a disaster every day, and they're in the sort of political elite and economic elite world. And they don't connect with other groups and people very much. So we're trying to do that. And then it's sort of also an identity. So we have a website, there's research that goes on. Because it's a network, lots of people can sort of put things into this sort of identity. And I made this morning, sorry. I wanted just to say something about ways of knowing. I don't know if there's sort of an equivalent phrase in Sweden. It's not a huge phrase in the UK. It's just this idea that there are many different ways to come to similar conclusions as to what we'll talk about today. And most of what I'll talk about today is going to be drawing heavily on social psychology, which is only one way of coming to these conclusions. And for some of the people in our network, they don't mind it, but they don't think it's actually as important as the way that they came to it and the way that they apply it already. So there's very similar conclusions. They're completely aligned. But it's the social psychology that doesn't work for everyone. And there are various other routes. And we have contacts increasingly with other academics from political science or from sociology. There's a lot of around spirituality and mindfulness and other things that connect in with it. So excuse me if this is a lot of academic research and that's not really what you like. But I think the reason that we do it from this point is it's the one thing that seems to change the larger NGOs. Senior people in NGOs seem to like this. It provides, the metaphor is it provides them with sort of an academic shield to do what they really feel is the right thing to do already. But they've got this defense mechanism, which means they're not just doing something because they feel it's the right thing to do. They can show some studies, basically. So maybe we'll come back to talking about that later, but I still think it is interesting to sort of reaffirm some of the things that we probably already know deep down. So, how do they work? Well, this is a ridiculously simple model of a person. And it's too simple, really, but you can think of it as sort of values and goals are quite related as being core, and they trickle out to sort of attitudes and behaviours. It's not that simple because there's lots of things that get in the way of that chain. Whether it's social norms, things that sort of are just common in society, habits, things that you're just very used to doing, physical constraints. Say you like cycling, but there isn't enough infrastructure. I know it's a big problem in the UK. There might also be financial constraints. I really would like to be more low carbon, but I just don't have the money to be able to do some of the extra things. But generally, that is a good way of just thinking about it. And to summarize about 40 or 50 years of social psychology in 4 slides, in 1992, Shalom Schwartz, who's an American social psychologist, published a paper which is a sort of seminal, very important paper. And he built upon a number of other researchers' work over decades. And he published a list of 60 values, which he had found, and other researchers, across 80 countries, were things that consistently came up when you ask people, what do you value in life? Okay. And what they found was that there's this cross-cultural set of values which pop up in all of these different countries. So there aren't an infinite number of things that you can value in life. It's not necessarily a finite number, but these things apply across quite many different countries and languages, over 50 different languages. North and south, rich and poor. The only place it doesn't apply, it seems, although they don't know, is indigenous cultures. They haven't really studied that. So they found these values, and I'd like to do an exercise with them. So when you all came in, we asked some of you to write some issues down that problems that you thought that you were worried about. And so I'm going to read some of them out, and if you could write them down, or someone on your table could write them down to remember them. So, extinction of species, inequality, war, hunger, climate change, a lack of love and wisdom. Final one. Does anyone else just want to throw out a few other problems if they're not in that list very quickly and worry about it?
Hunger.
Hunger's in there, sorry. Yeah.
Cocktail effect.
Cultural.
Cocktail effect, chemicals.
Okay, yeah, chemicals, pollution.
Social collapse.
Social collapse, good one. So what I'd like you to do is, using that list, imagine a society, this is a tough one, imagine a society that started to address all of those issues, started to solve them, okay? And using your handbooks that you should all have a copy of, on page 65, I've jumbled up all of Schwartz's values. What I'd like you to do is imagining that sustainable society, and I mean sustainability in its broadest possible sense, so solving all of those sorts of issues, starting to. Pick 5 things you think that society would value most strongly, and 5 things you think it would value least strongly. Okay? And on page 66 and 67, there are definitions for the values. They're in English, sorry. But you should also have a glossary of the translations into Swedish of the values. So imagining a society that has started to solve these problems, your sort of imaginary society, what does it value most strongly? Pick 5. What does it value least strongly? Pick 5. Okay? And once you've done that, if you can sort of stand up and you'll get some stickers. You can chat with people if you like, but this is a sort of individual exercise. If you've finished, head towards one of the boards and you'll get some stickers somehow.